The office building was always quiet at night. Most of the lights were off except for a few in the hallway, and the sound of the cleaning cart rolling across the floor echoed softly through the empty space. She moved from one room to another, carefully dusting desks and wiping down windows. Her hands were rough from constant cleaning, but she never complained. She needed this job more than anything. Every night after finishing her shift at the diner, she came here to work as a cleaner in one of the biggest corporate offices in the city. She had been doing it for 6 months now, ever since her mother fell sick and couldn't work anymore. Her younger brother was still in school, and she wanted him to have the education she never got. Life had never been easy, but she always found a way to keep going. She didn't talk much at work. Most of the office staff barely noticed her. They'd pass by her like she was invisible, focused on their meetings, calls, and emails. She didn't mind, though. She just wanted to finish her hours quietly, collect her paycheck, and go home. Every night she carried a small old diary in her bag, the only thing that was truly hers. It wasn't fancy, just a plain brown notebook, but inside it were her thoughts, her secrets, her prayers, and her dreams. Whenever she felt tired or hopeless, she would sit in the break room during her short break, take out her diary, and write. She would write about how hard the day was, but also about the little things that gave her strength, like her mother's smile after taking her medicine, or her brother showing her his school report card. That small diary held pieces of her heart. That night the weather was cold, and rain hit the windows outside as she worked in the CEO's office. The room was big, neat, and smelled faintly of coffee and paper. She looked around carefully before dusting the shelves. There were family photos, awards, and books that looked expensive. She never touched anything more than she had to. After all, she knew her place there. She was just a cleaner. She was finishing up when she heard her phone buzz. It was a message from her brother, saying that their mother had been coughing again. Her heart dropped. She texted back quickly, telling him to give her medicine and keep her warm. Her hands trembled slightly as she put the phone back in her pocket. She didn't even realize that when she leaned over the desk, her small diary slipped out of her bag and landed quietly under the chair. By the time she finished cleaning, she was in a hurry to catch the last bus home. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and left, never noticing that the most personal thing she owned was still lying on the office floor. The next morning, the building was full again. Employees rushed in with their coffees, talking about reports and deadlines. The CEO arrived a bit later than usual. He was a man known for his calm but distant personality. He had built the company from the ground up and was respected by everyone, though many also feared him. He didn't like small talk or unnecessary emotions. For him, everything was about work and results. As he sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, something caught his eye under the chair. It looked like a small notebook. He picked it up, wondering who could have left it there. The cover was worn, and there was a name written faintly on the inside. It wasn't any of his managers or staff, probably someone from maintenance, he guessed. He thought about leaving it at reception, but curiosity made him open it. The first page was simple. A few short lines written in neat handwriting. Today was a hard day. I'm so tired, but I can't stop. Mom needs medicine again, and I have to find a way to pay for it. He paused. His eyes lingered on the words longer than he expected. He flipped to the next page, then another, reading quietly. The entries were short, sometimes just a few sentences, but each one carried so much feeling. She wrote about her worries, her exhaustion, but also about her dreams. How she wished to study one day, how she wanted to build a better life for her family, how she hoped people would see her not as a cleaner, but as a person with dreams too. For some reason, he couldn't stop reading. He had read hundreds of reports and business proposals in his life, but never something like this. Something so raw, so real. It made him think of things he hadn't thought about in years. His own childhood, the struggles his parents faced when he was young, the moments he had forgotten since he became too focused on success. He read until he reached a page where her words grew shakier. Sometimes I feel invisible at work. People look through me like I'm not even there. But I keep smiling. I remind myself that being kind still matters, even if no one sees it. He leaned back in his chair, his throat tight. For a moment he stared out the window, the city lights reflecting on the glass. He realized how disconnected he had become from the people who worked around him, the cleaners, the drivers, the helpers. He had built a huge company, but maybe he had lost touch with the human side of it. Later that day, she returned to work as usual, unaware that her diary had been found. The whole day she felt uneasy, like something was missing. She searched her bag during her break and froze when she realized it was gone. Panic filled her chest. That diary had everything: her private thoughts, her worries, even the things she never said out loud. She couldn't imagine anyone reading it. But what could she do? Ask around? Go to the office and say she lost a diary in the CEO's room? No, she couldn't risk that. If anyone found out she had been careless in his office, she might lose her job. That night she worked in silence. Her eyes were tired and her heart felt heavy. She tried to focus, but her mind kept wandering to her missing diary. She whispered a small prayer, hoping that whoever found it would just throw it away without reading. She didn't know that the man she feared the most had read every page. The CEO couldn't get the diary out of his mind. He left work late, but even as he drove home, the words replayed in his head. They were simple words, written by someone who probably earned less in a month than he spent in a single day. Yet they had more honesty than anything he had read in years. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her life, about how unfair it was that someone could work so hard and still struggle so much. The next morning, he came to the office early. The diary was still on his desk. He opened it again, flipping through until he reached the last page. The final entry was short, written just 2 days ago. No matter how tired I get, I'll keep going. One day things will change. I believe that even if no one sees my worth now, maybe someday someone will. He stopped breathing for a moment. That one line hit him harder than he expected. Even if no one sees my worth now, maybe someday someone will. It was such a simple sentence, but it carried pain, strength, and hope all at once. He realized how much people like her went unseen, how their kindness and effort were overlooked every day. He looked out the window, deep in thought. The office around him was silent. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Maybe guilt, maybe admiration, maybe both. He knew he had to find out who she was. But how could he ask without making it awkward or embarrassing for her? He didn't want to scare her or make her think she was in trouble. As the day went on, he quietly asked the head of cleaning who worked the night shift. When he heard her name, he remembered her face. The quiet girl who always kept her head down and never spoke unless spoken to. He had seen her before, but never really seen her. Not until now. That night she returned again, still sad but determined to work. She didn't know that the CEO had stayed late on purpose. From inside his office he heard the faint sound of the cleaning cart and the soft hum of a mop on the floor. He stepped out quietly and watched her for a moment. She was moving quickly, her eyes focused on her work. There was something gentle but strong about her presence. She looked tired, yet she smiled faintly as she worked. He wanted to speak to her right then, but stopped himself. Maybe it wasn't the right time. Instead, he went back to his desk, looked at her diary one last time, and decided that tomorrow he would find a way to return it, not as a boss to an employee, but as a person to another person. That night, she went home unaware that something big was about to change in her life, all because of the little diary she thought she had lost forever. The next day, the girl arrived at work feeling uneasy. Her stomach churned as she thought about the diary. She kept checking her bag, half expecting to see it there, but it was still gone. She worried about what might have happened to it. Could someone have read it? Would someone tell her off? Her hands trembled as she pushed the cleaning cart down the hall, trying to act normal. At the same time, the CEO had already begun his quiet investigation. He didn't want to embarrass her or make her feel awkward, so he asked around subtly. The head of the cleaning staff mentioned her by name, saying she always worked late, never complained, and cared deeply for her family. Her dedication impressed him even more. He wanted to understand her, to see the person behind the diary that had affected him so much. For the next few days, he observed her silently. She didn't notice him, and that was part of what touched him most. She worked hard with careful attention to every task. She greeted people politely but rarely spoke to anyone. She never complained even when she had to clean floors that were sticky or dust that made her sneeze. He saw her pause for a moment sometimes, looking out the window as if reimagining a better life. Her quiet strength left a deep impression on him. At home, her days were just as hard. After her night shift at the office, she went straight to take care of her mother and help her brother with homework. Sometimes she didn't even eat properly, just grabbing a quick snack before starting laundry or cleaning. She felt exhausted most of the time, but she never let herself show weakness. She had learned early that survival meant pushing forward no matter what. Still inside, she dreamed of more. She dreamed of studying, of traveling, of being able to give her family the life they deserved. Her diary captured those dreams, and now without it she felt a little empty, like a piece of herself had been taken away. One evening, while she was cleaning the office, she noticed the CEO's office door slightly ajar. She froze for a moment, unsure if she should go in. Usually she worked in silence and avoided entering that space, but she remembered she had missed a corner near his desk. Quietly, she pushed the door open, careful not to make a sound. She was bending down to reach the corner when she heard a soft cough behind her. She looked up and saw him, the CEO himself, standing there watching her. Her heart raced. She didn't know what to say. For a moment she thought she might be in trouble, but instead of scolding her, he smiled gently. It wasn't the usual polite smile of a boss. It was warmer, personal. "You've been working really hard," he said softly. "I've noticed." She blinked, stunned. No one had ever said that to her before. Not in this building, not in her life, not in a long, long time. I'm doing my job," she stammered. She wasn't used to being noticed in a positive way. Usually people ignored her or treated her like she didn't matter. He stepped closer and handed her the diary. She looked at it, then at him, then back at it as if she didn't understand. "I found this," he said. "I think it belongs to you." Her hands shook as she took it. She opened it cautiously, half afraid that someone had read it, but it was intact, exactly as she had left it. Relief flooded her, but she still felt embarrassed. I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I thought I had lost it forever." He shook his head. "There's nothing to be sorry about. I read some of it." Her eyes widened, fear and surprise mixing. "You read it?" she asked softly. "Yes," he admitted. "I shouldn't have, maybe, but I couldn't stop. Your words, they made me think. They made me realize how much people like you go unseen every day, how hard you work and how much you carry on your own." She looked down, blushing. She wasn't used to anyone noticing her struggles, let alone respecting them. For the first time in her life, someone truly saw her. Not just the girl cleaning the floors, not just the employee doing her job, but her worries, her hopes, her dreams. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She had been through too much to cry in front of someone she barely knew. He continued, speaking gently now. "I want to help you. I can't fix everything, but I want to give you a chance. A chance to study, to learn, to grow, and to be recognized for who you really are." She stared at him, speechless. No one had ever offered her anything like this. She had always dreamed of opportunities, but she never imagined they would come from someone like him. Over the next few weeks, he quietly arranged for her to have a new role in the company. She wouldn't be cleaning anymore. Instead, she would train as an assistant, helping with small tasks while continuing her studies with the company's support. When the news was delivered, she could hardly believe it. Her heart felt like it might burst. She remembered the last line she had written in her diary. "Even if no one sees my worth now, maybe someday someone will." She had written it as a quiet hope, almost like a prayer, and now here was someone who had read it and acted upon it. Her small hope had been noticed, and it had changed her life. But the change wasn't just for her. The CEO found himself shifting too. He began noticing employees differently. He realized that many of the people in his company worked hard without recognition, without praise, and without hope. Seeing her struggle and her courage reminded him that success wasn't just about profit or growth. It was about people, their stories, their lives, their worth. She adjusted slowly to her new role. She still worked hard, but now she had a purpose beyond survival. She could study at night, learn new skills, and plan for the future. Her family noticed the change in her too. Her mother smiled more, her brother studied harder, and the small apartment they lived in felt brighter than it had in years. Her diary, once lost, became a symbol of hope. She continued writing in it, now filling pages not just with worries but with dreams that seemed closer to reality. Each page reminded her that even small voices could matter, and even quiet people could touch powerful hearts. The CEO also kept the diary. He read it sometimes in moments of quiet reflection. He would smile at her words, remember the hope she carried, and feel inspired to be a better leader. not just in business but in humanity. Her courage and honesty had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years. One afternoon, he called her to his office. She walked in nervously, unsure of what he wanted. But he smiled warmly and said, "I want you to know that your words, your life, and your determination matter. You've inspired me and reminded me what's really important." She couldn't help but smile back, tears brimming again, but this time of happiness. Her story was spreading quietly through the company. People noticed her new role, her dedication, and the quiet strength that had always been there. She became a small inspiration, a reminder that hard work and honesty could be recognized even in the most unexpected ways. And so, the girl who had once felt invisible began to realize her own worth. She learned that even the smallest actions, a diary entry, a kind word, a quiet smile, could ripple out and touch someone else's life in ways she could never imagine. Her world, once heavy with worry and struggle, began to open with possibilities, and she discovered that sometimes hope finds its way in when you least expect it. By the end of the month, she was no longer just a cleaner in the office. She was a learner, a dreamer, and a young woman who had been seen, truly seen for the first time in her life. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the office, the CEO kept thinking about that last line of her diary, realizing that life sometimes had a way of reminding even the most powerful people about the strength and value of those around them. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. The following weeks were a mix of excitement and nervousness for the girl. She was slowly adjusting to her new role as an assistant, which meant she had new responsibilities and opportunities to learn. For the first time, she felt she was being treated like more than just a cleaner. Every morning, she would wake up a little earlier, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wanted to learn, to grow, and to make the most of the chance that had been given to her. At the office, she noticed a subtle change in how people looked at her. Some of the staff, who had once barely acknowledged her presence, now nodded politely or smiled when she passed. It wasn't pride or arrogance that came with her new role. It was a quiet confidence that grew each day. She still carried her diary everywhere, writing in it nightly. But now her words were different. They weren't just about struggle. They were about hope, determination, and small victories. The CEO, on the other hand, was quietly fascinated by the girl. He had always been someone who measured life in numbers, profits, sales, growth, and efficiency. But now he found himself noticing moments that didn't fit into spreadsheets. He noticed the way she smiled at the janitors when she passed, how she gently helped a nervous new intern find the photocopier, how she spoke kindly to the security guards. There was a kindness in her actions that he had not seen in years. One afternoon, the CEO decided to have a private meeting with her. He called her to his office and offered her a seat across from him. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She was grateful for the opportunity he had given her, but sitting here in the office where she had once been invisible made her nervous. "I want to hear more about you," he said gently. "Not about work, not about tasks, but about your dreams. Your goals. What do you hope for?" She hesitated, unsure if she should speak. She wasn't used to people asking about her dreams, especially not someone like him, but something about his tone made her trust him. I want to study," she began softly. "I want to learn things I never had a chance to. I want to help my family, give them a better life. I want to be someone they can be proud of." Her words trembled slightly, but she kept going. "I know it sounds silly. I'm just a cleaning staff member. People like me don't usually get these chances." He leaned back in his chair, listening carefully. "It's not silly at all," he said. "I've read your diary. I know how much you've struggled, how much you've sacrificed. That's exactly why I want to help you. You've worked hard when no one was watching, and now it's time someone supports you." Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected him to be so understanding. She had always felt invisible, like no one would ever see her worth. And yet here was someone who not only saw her, but wanted to give her a chance to grow. Over the next few days, he arranged for her to attend evening classes at a nearby community college while continuing her work during the day. The company also provided her with a small stipend to cover books and supplies. For the first time, she felt the weight of hope instead of constant worry. She could almost feel her life starting to change, page by page, much like the diary she carried with her every day. As she worked and studied, she faced new challenges. Learning while working full-time was not easy. Some nights, she stayed up late, her eyes burning with exhaustion as she wrote assignments by the dim light of a small desk lamp. Her mother noticed her fatigue but never complained, encouraging her gently instead. Her brother often helped her with the simplest things, bringing her tea or making sure she ate properly. It was a new kind of support she had never experienced before, and it gave her strength. Meanwhile, the CEO began noticing other employees who were quietly struggling, much like her. He realized that there were countless people in his company working hard, unnoticed, carrying burdens silently. Her diary had opened his eyes. It made him wonder how many talented, hard-working people he had overlooked simply because their struggles were invisible. He decided to make subtle changes, small gestures of recognition, personal conversations and encouragement, starting with her, and slowly extending to others. One day, as she organized files in the office, the CEO came in holding a small box. "This is for you," he said. She looked at him, confused, and opened the box. Inside were books she had mentioned wanting to read, notebooks, and even a small laptop. She could hardly believe it. You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I want you to have what you need to succeed," he said simply. "You've shown dedication and courage. Now I want to make sure you have the tools to follow your dreams." She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. For the first time in her life, she felt truly supported by someone in a position of power. It wasn't pity he was giving her. It was respect and opportunity. Her life began to change in other ways as well. Her confidence grew, and she started speaking up more at work. When someone asked for help, she offered assistance without hesitation. When a task seemed complicated, she approached it with determination instead of fear. People began to notice the shift, seeing not just the girl who had once cleaned the floors, but someone capable, intelligent, and kind. But the journey wasn't without struggle. Balancing work, study, and family responsibilities tested her limits. Some nights she would lie awake thinking she couldn't continue. She would open her diary and read the pages she had written during her hardest days. The words reminded her why she was pushing forward. They reminded her that hope and perseverance were stronger than fatigue and fear. Meanwhile, the CEO continued observing quietly. He watched how she managed her time, how she faced challenges with a quiet determination that inspired others around her. He realized that her courage was contagious. Other employees, seeing her dedication and growth, began to work harder and support one another. The atmosphere in the company started to change subtly. Respect, empathy, and understanding were slowly becoming a part of the culture, all because one diary had revealed the life of someone who had been invisible. One evening, as she left the office, she looked up at the building, its glass walls reflecting the sunset. She thought about how far she had come in just a few weeks. From being invisible and fearful, she had become someone who was noticed, respected, and supported. She carried her diary close, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the life she was building. The CEO in his office looked at the city lights and thought about her words. That last line of her diary kept replaying in his mind. "Even if no one sees my worth now, maybe someday someone will." He realized that he had been blind to the lives of people around him for far too long. Her courage had reminded him of the importance of empathy and human connection. He decided that he wanted to do more. If one diary could change his perspective so deeply, how many other voices were unheard, unnoticed, waiting for someone to see their worth? He began planning initiatives to support employees at all levels, to provide opportunities for those who had been overlooked, and to ensure that no one in his company would feel invisible again. For her part, the girl continued to thrive. Each day was a challenge, but also a step forward. She studied diligently, worked hard, and supported her family as best as she could. Her diary, once a private record of struggle, had become a guide for hope. She wrote not only about her challenges, but about her progress, her gratitude, and her dreams for the future. One afternoon, the CEO called her in again. "I want to hear more about your family," he said. "Your mother, your brother. I want to understand more about the people who inspire you." She smiled shyly, realizing that he wasn't just interested in her work, but in her life, her struggles, and her dreams. It was a level of attention and care she had never experienced before. She began sharing small stories about her family, the little victories they celebrated, the hardships they faced, and the dreams they held. He listened quietly, absorbing every word. He was learning that true leadership wasn't just about decisions and profits. It was about understanding the lives of the people who made the company what it was. By the end of part 3, both their lives had been transformed in subtle but profound ways. The girl had gained confidence, knowledge, and hope. The CEO had gained empathy, insight, and a renewed sense of purpose. And all of it had started with a small, lost diary, full of honest thoughts and quiet dreams. Her life was no longer defined solely by struggle. She was becoming someone who could shape her own destiny, and in doing so, she was also shaping the world around her, proving that even one small voice, when truly heard, could inspire change far beyond what anyone could imagine. The months that followed brought quiet but steady change. The girl's life was not perfect, but it was no longer filled with the same kind of fear and exhaustion she once knew. She was learning, growing, and believing in herself again. Every morning when she entered the tall glass building, she no longer walked with her eyes on the floor. She walked with a purpose. Her small desk near the executive offices was neatly arranged. She handled reports, managed calls, and helped organize meetings. It was work that demanded attention and care, but she loved it. Every day she learned something new. Sometimes she made small mistakes, but she never let them break her spirit. The CEO noticed her progress with quiet pride. He didn't treat her like a charity case. He treated her like someone who belonged there. That was what she respected most about him. He gave her a chance, but she was the one who worked hard to prove she deserved it. Even with her busy schedule, she never stopped writing in her diary. Each night she would fill a few pages, not with sadness now, but with gratitude. She wrote about the lessons she learned, the people she met, and how her heart felt lighter each day. One evening, she wrote something that reflected her journey. When life gives you a second chance, don't waste it. Use it to help others who are still waiting for theirs. She didn't know that this very thought would soon become her reality. The CEO, on his end, had been thinking a lot. Her diary had not only changed the way he saw her, but the way he saw his entire company. He had started new programs for employees who worked in low-wage positions. He wanted to make sure no one in his company ever felt invisible again. Training sessions, scholarships, and welfare programs were being quietly introduced. People began noticing the difference. The workplace started to feel more human. One afternoon, the CEO decided to hold a company gathering. A simple event where everyone, from top management to janitors, was invited. It wasn't common in his company before, but he wanted to bring everyone together. There would be food, music, and speeches of appreciation. When the girl heard about it, she was both nervous and excited. She had never been to such an event before. The idea of being in the same room with people she used to clean after felt strange but beautiful. She spent the entire week preparing, working extra hours, making sure everything ran smoothly. She didn't know that she would be one of the highlights of that day. The event day arrived. The hall was bright and full of chatter. People laughed and talked freely. For once, there were no titles, no hierarchies, just people sharing a space together. The CEO stood on stage, greeting everyone with a rare smile. He wasn't the cold, serious man people remembered. There was something softer about him now. He began to speak, thanking his team for their hard work and dedication. Then his tone changed. Sometimes, he said, we go through life seeing people but not really seeing them. We walk past others without knowing their struggles, their dreams, or their strength. But every person here matters. Every one of you contributes to this place in ways that truly count. The room grew quiet. He continued, a few months ago I found something in my office, something that opened my eyes. It was a simple diary written by one of our own. Inside it were words that reminded me of what it means to be human, to feel and to care. People exchanged glances, curious and surprised. The girl froze in her seat. Her heart pounded as she realized what he was talking about. She didn't know he would mention it publicly. He paused, scanning the room until his eyes met hers. She felt her breath catch. That diary belonged to someone who worked here quietly without recognition, but with immense courage and kindness. Her words changed how I see this company. And myself. She reminded me that no one is invisible, that even the smallest voice can carry the biggest truth. The room was silent. Everyone turned to see who he was referring to. The CEO smiled gently and gestured for her to come forward. I want to thank her in front of all of you, he said softly, because she reminded me that true strength often wears no uniform, holds no title, and asks for no reward. Her hands trembled as she stood up. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. She walked slowly toward the stage, each step heavier with emotion. When she reached him, he handed her a small envelope. "This," he said, "is a scholarship for you to continue your studies full-time. The company will support you until you complete your education. You've earned it, not because of sympathy, but because of who you are, because of your courage, your hard work, and your heart." Her eyes filled with tears as she held the envelope close. She couldn't speak. The hall erupted in applause. People who had once walked past her without a glance were now clapping for her, smiling, cheering. The sound filled the room, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. When she finally found her voice, it came out shaky but sincere. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for this, but for seeing me, for seeing all of us who are usually unseen. I never wanted anything big. I just wanted to work hard and help my family. I never thought my words could matter to someone like you." The CEO nodded. "Your words reminded me that every person has a story worth hearing," he said quietly, "and that sometimes those stories change lives." After the event, people came up to her, people who had once ignored her. They congratulated her, told her how proud they were, how inspired they felt. The janitors hugged her. Her fellow assistants cried with happiness. And even managers told her she had made them rethink the meaning of hard work and kindness. That night, when she went home, her mother and brother were waiting for her. They had watched a recording of the event shared on the company's social page. Her mother cried when she saw her daughter standing on stage beside the CEO. Her brother couldn't stop smiling. Their small home felt like the warmest place in the world that night. She sat by the window later, the scholarship letter in her hand, her diary open on her lap. She wrote with trembling hands, tears falling onto the page. "Today I was seen. Not because I asked to be, but because I kept believing when no one noticed. I hope others like me will believe too, that one day someone will see their worth." She closed the diary gently and looked out the window at the stars. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt like her life had a purpose beyond just survival. Meanwhile, the CEO sat in his office long after everyone had left. The hall was quiet again, much like the night he had first found the diary. He opened his drawer and took out a copy of her last entry. He had written it down months ago because it had stayed in his heart. He read it once more and smiled. "Even if no one sees your worth now, maybe someday someone will." Those words had changed everything. They had opened his eyes to what leadership truly meant. Not power or authority, but empathy and humanity. He realized that his success meant nothing if he couldn't use it to lift others up. That night, he made a silent promise to himself. He would continue building not just a company, but a community, one where everyone, no matter their role, felt valued and respected. He knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but he was ready to start. As days passed, the girl began preparing for her studies. She continued working part-time, helping others the way she had been helped. Whenever she saw a new cleaner or helper looking nervous, she smiled and encouraged them. She told them her story, not with pride, but with hope. And slowly her story became known throughout the company. People shared it, learned from it, and carried it with them as a reminder that kindness could change more than one life. It could change an entire culture. She never stopped writing in her diary. It was still her closest friend, her listener, her silent supporter. But now its pages were filled with new words, words of strength, gratitude, and belief. She wrote about her future, about giving back, and about helping others believe in their own worth. And though life still had its challenges, she no longer faced them alone. She had her family, her work, her studies, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her voice, once hidden in the pages of a lost diary, had made the world around her a little kinder. Time passed quietly, but change continued to ripple through every corner of the company. What had started as one lost diary had become something far greater, a movement of compassion that no one had expected. People began treating each other differently. There was more kindness in conversations, more patience in misunderstandings, and more unity across the workplace. The CEO had kept his promise. He launched new programs that supported education for low-income employees, created better working conditions, and made sure that everyone, from the cleaners to the executives, had a voice. The company had started to feel more like a family, and it all traced back to one small diary that had been forgotten under a pile of papers. The girl, now balancing work and studies, had become a quiet inspiration to many. People from different departments often came to her for advice. They told her how her story had helped them look at their own lives differently. Some said it encouraged them to go back to school. Others said it reminded them to treat others with more respect. She never boasted about it. She always said the same thing with a humble smile. If my story helped someone, then losing that diary was worth it. Her life was busy but peaceful. She studied hard, often staying up late at night reading, writing, and preparing for exams. There were times when she felt tired and unsure, but then she would open her diary and read her old entries. They reminded her of how far she had come and why she couldn't give up now. One morning, she received an unexpected email from the CEO's assistant. It was a formal invitation to a new event at the company. The subject line read, "Special recognition ceremony you are requested to attend." She thought it was probably another company gathering, but when she read further, she realized this event was different. It was to honor employees who had inspired change through their actions and character. She didn't think she belonged in that group, but the letter clearly mentioned her name. The day of the ceremony arrived. She wore a simple dress, the same one she had worn to the previous company event. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the grand hall, filled with hundreds of people. There were new faces, familiar ones, and warm smiles all around. The CEO walked onto the stage, greeted by a respectful silence. He spoke calmly but with emotion in his voice. "Every company has its story," he began. "But what truly defines that story is the people who give it heart. Today, we celebrate those whose actions remind us why we do what we do." He paused and looked around the hall before continuing. "A few years ago, something small happened in this building, something that seemed ordinary, but it changed everything. One of our employees lost something very personal, a diary. When I read the last line, I realized how blind I had been to the lives of those working beside us every day. That diary opened my eyes and my heart." Everyone listened in silence. Some knew the story by now, but many new employees didn't. The girl lowered her eyes, feeling a rush of emotion. The CEO went on, "That diary taught me that leadership is not about giving orders. It's about listening, understanding, and helping others grow. It reminded me that true success is not measured by profit, but by people, by the lives we touch." He smiled gently and said, "Today I want to honor the person who unknowingly started this change. She didn't do it for fame or attention. She did it simply by being herself, by working hard, and by believing that kindness still matters." The room filled with soft murmurs. Then he said her name. The hall erupted in applause. People turned, clapping and smiling as she slowly stood up. Her heart was beating fast. She could hardly believe this was happening again. She walked toward the stage, each step feeling like a dream. The CEO handed her a framed certificate and a small golden key. "This key," he said, "is symbolic. It represents the door you opened, not just for yourself, but for everyone here. Your words unlocked compassion in this company, and that will never be forgotten." Her hands trembled as she accepted it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. "I never thought something so small could change so much," she said softly into the microphone. "All I did was write my thoughts. I was scared and tired then, but writing helped me believe that one day things could get better. I didn't know someone would read it, or that it would mean anything. But now I know even small voices matter. Sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that touch the deepest." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. People stood and clapped for her. The applause felt endless, echoing through the hall. Even the CEO looked emotional. After the ceremony, people came up to her once again, some hugging her, some simply thanking her. One of the cleaning staff, an older woman, held her hand and said with tears, "You made all of us proud. You showed the world that no job is small and no dream is too big." The girl hugged her back and said, "We all have stories. Don't stop believing in yours." As months passed, the girl finished her studies with excellent results. The company offered her a higher position, one that involved managing employee welfare and support programs. It was the same initiative that had started because of her story. Now she was helping design it and lead it herself. She worked closely with the CEO, who treated her not as an employee, but as a trusted advisor. He often asked her opinion on decisions that affected the workers. Her insight came from experience. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, and she made sure no one ever felt that way again. Her life at home changed, too. Her mother's health improved. Her brother was now studying in college with a scholarship, and their home felt lighter, filled with laughter and hope. There were still struggles, but they no longer defined them. They had learned to face everything together. One evening, the girl sat at her small desk by the window, her diary open in front of her. The pages were now filled with stories not of sadness but of growth, gratitude, and love. She turned to the last blank page and took a deep breath. Then she began to write. This diary once carried my pain. It held my fears, my tears, and my hopes. It was my secret world, the only place I could speak freely. I never imagined it would one day speak for me, to the world. If someone finds these pages one day, I hope they understand that life can change in the most unexpected ways. Even when everything seems lost, something good might be waiting just around the corner. She closed the diary, holding it close to her heart. She didn't hide it this time. Instead, she placed it neatly on her shelf, a reminder of where she came from and how far she had gone. Meanwhile, the CEO continued his mission quietly. He had started a foundation in her name, one that supported education for underprivileged workers and their families. The girl didn't know about it until he called her one afternoon to his office. When she arrived, he smiled and handed her a file. "Open it," he said. She did, and as she read the title, her eyes widened. The Hope Foundation. She looked up at him in disbelief. "You named this after?" He nodded. "After the person who gave me hope again." Tears filled her eyes. She didn't know what to say. The CEO simply said, "You showed me what real leadership means. This foundation will make sure your story continues to inspire others long after both of us are gone." For a long moment, they both stood there in silence. Two people from completely different worlds who had changed each other's lives in ways they never imagined. Years later, people would still talk about her story. New employees would hear it on their first day, told not as a fairy tale but as a real reminder that humanity still exists in the workplace. The company had grown larger, but its heart had remained the same, compassionate, humble, and kind. The girl, now a woman with her own small family, would sometimes walk through the office halls watching others work and smile. She still carried her diary in her bag, old and worn, its pages yellow with time, because it wasn't just a book. It was her journey, her proof that even the smallest act could change everything. And whenever she saw someone struggling, lost, or unnoticed, she would quietly tell them, "Keep going. You never know who might be reading your story next." Because she had learned one truth the hard way, even the smallest words written from the heart could awaken something powerful in others. And sometimes a simple diary could change not just one life, but many. I left behind, not a company, not a foundation, but a reminder that kindness, once given, never fades. It only grows, spreading from one heart to another, changing the world quietly, one small act at a time.